Hi guys, welcome back to Why Do Men, the podcast where we explore male behaviour in dating and relationships. Really appreciate all your support so far this series. Don't forget, comment, like, subscribe. It really helps boost us up the Spotify ratings. Today's episode is going to ruffle some feathers, but it's a really important one. We're talking about a pattern that's become very familiar. When men get hurt, rejected, or feel insecure, they often don't look inward. Instead, they point the finger outward, often at women. Why do men blame women for their own pain, their own dating struggles, or even their broader dissatisfaction with life? And how do behaviours and attitudes like misogyny feed into this? To help us explore this, I'm rejoined by Lalalaletmeexplain. Lala came on the pod to do an episode about ghosting. It's the most listened to episode. Lala is an educator, author, and an unflinching voice on misogyny, feminism, and modern dating. And together, we're going to unpack where this blame comes from, how it shows up, and how we start to heal it. Welcome, Lala.
Hi, thanks for having me back.
You're so welcome. I'm really, really excited about this episode. Every episode that I've done has normally involved me inputting and providing my own perspective. But the reason why I'm excited about this episode today is because sometimes I have guests on talking about topics where, if I'm honest, I need to educate myself. And I really hope that's the case with a lot of the listeners today. It's a very broad topic. We spoke just before we were shooting about how we go into this. And I thought we should start with feminism. I hear a lot of men refer to feminism as a negative thing, right? Because that idea of equality has often made them feel marginalised. Can I just sort of start with that and get your take on that?
Well, you're right. And especially at the moment, a lot of men are blaming feminism for all of the world's problems and for all of their personal relationship problems. So feminism has certainly been the thing that men are looking to as something that has been a negative for them. But of course, it's been an extremely positive thing for women and actually for men as well. Yeah. I think feminism is not exclusively about making things better for women. Of course, that had to be the strategy and the kind of central point because things were so bad for women. But it's not. Feminism is about equality of genders. Yeah. That doesn't mean making things worse for men or that feminism doesn't care about men. Actually, feminism wants healthy, happy men because healthy, happy men treat women as equals and are better in relationships with us and will help to create a more accommodating and equitable world for everybody. So feminism is about everybody. It is about changing systems and structures that oppress women and people who identify women, but also that oppresses men who don't fit into the very rigid mold that the patriarchy has created for them. So feminism is a positive for everyone. I don't know if that was the question. I don't think the question was, is feminism good? But anyway, that's the answer I gave you.
But I'm just trying to put myself in the mindset of a man that might feel threatened by that. We spoke before the episode about, I almost come from a place of privilege, right? Because I'm middle class. I live in a city. I'm, hopefully reasonably well educated. And for me, that idea of equality, I could never, ever see a negative around that. Why would some men see it as a negative?
Well, there's lots of reasons. And I think it's a notion that has existed since time began. Like Eve was blamed for everything. Eve was blamed when, I don't know what, I'm not religious, but Adam and Eve, that story literally centers on Eve being to blame for all of the ills of the world because I think she ate the apple or whatever. And then it was written into religion that, men are in charge and women are to blame. In religious texts, it tells you that women should be stoned for cheating, whereas men aren't. Men have no consequences. Yeah. So the world blames women for everything because they have been taught to, from the very first religious scripts that ever existed, is full of Madonna whore stuff. It's full of Mary being, the archetypal virgin, and any other woman who has independence or whatever, or who isn't under the protection of a man, it is going to fail. So men have literally been taught that's how the world runs.
Yeah.
And I think that we're also sort of taught that very subtly, even when we go into schools and families and things, you know, boys will be boys is a statement that we hear all the time. So boys can get away with a lot more than girls can, whereas women and girls are often you know, taught to take that responsibility and hold responsibility. And especially as we see now in like incel culture and things like that, I mean, they are hugely blaming women for all of their ills.
Yeah.
They are creating this resentment because they believe that they are entitled to sex. And instead of looking inwards at themselves and thinking, well, what is it about me that is, you know, making it harder for me to find relationships with women, they're blaming women. They're saying that women, it's women's fault that men are lonely now. It's women's fault that men aren't getting sex now because women like bad boys, or women are too picky, or women don't know what they want. It's very rare for those types of men to look inwards at themselves and say, well, what is it about me that's making my life more lonely?
Yeah. I completely agree with all of that. And that sense of dissatisfaction amongst young men in particular, that, you know, frankly, they're not getting laid. Like, if you look at the data, it shows that young men are having less sex than their cohorts were a generation ago. It's easy to blame women for that, because that would be, I guess, the logical sort of thought process in a way. I want to have sex with a woman's not having sex with me, it's the woman to blame. Do you have a sense as to like the other factors that are causing that dissatisfaction amongst young men?
What you mean in terms of incels?
Well, more broadly than that. Like, if I'm a young man and I want to be attractive to a woman, but a woman's not attractive to me, why is that the case with guys? Like, why are they blaming women? What are the other societal factors that are like contributing to that lack of virality?
Well, I mean, it is not necessarily societal factors, because some men are having lots of sex with women, and some men are having successful relationships with women. And so it's for those men who are finding it difficult, yes, to recognise what parts of society might be contributing, particularly to their thoughts and beliefs. A lot of boys are raised, and men are raised, to believe that the path is kind of set. You know, you're going to grow up, you're going to marry a woman. What you have to do in that is simply have a job so that you can pay the bills, protect her from I don't know what, because how often is that protection going to have to come in? In 43 years, no one has ever broken into my house. You know, if I was married to a man who's there as the protector, he's not yet had his opportunity to fucking do his job yet. So I don't know what you're doing for the rest of the time. But men have been given this idea that that's your role, protector, provider, and in return for doing your bit as a man, which is just getting a job basically, and maybe having some aggression, in return you will get a devoted wife who cleans your house, who cooks for you, who bears children for you, who takes on all of the responsibility for that, and also fucks you and sucks your dick whenever you need that. So now that society is shifting, and it has been shifting for a whole generation now, since the sort of 70s really, things are different, and women are able to get jobs. Women are able to have access to finances in ways that we weren't able to before without men. And so now women are leveling up, and women are saying that thing that we needed you before, you know, it wasn't until 1975, 6 years before I was born, that women, our mums, were able to have credit cards without a male co-signatory. We were allowed to rent and own businesses without a male co-signatory. 1975, right?
I can almost remember 1975.
Huh?
I can almost remember 1975.
Yeah, well, just think of the band. Yeah, well, exactly. It's not that long before you were born. Our parents were so it's very new stuff that women have then gone, okay, we can get an education, we can get a job. The job market is now open to us. Laws have been put in place around equal pay, although that's still not quite right. And now we want more we don't just need you to provide and protect. We can provide, we can protect.
Yeah.
So we need more from you. And what that thing that we need more from you is emotional intelligence. We need partners who can show up, who can be vulnerable, who can meet us where we're at, who can create a partnership. And instead of a lot of men going, oh, okay, this is uncomfortable, but I need to, it's not going to be this path that was set for me if I'd been born in the 1950s. It's actually now I have to do some work on myself. I have to figure out what it is that women need for me to be able to meet them where they're at for a relationship.
Yeah.
And some men just aren't willing to do that. Some men don't listen to women enough to realise that actually that's what you need to do. So again, they go inwards, they listen to the wrong sources, a lot of red pill manosphere stuff that tells them it's because these bitches just want a 6-foot man with a 6-pack and a 6-inch dick or what, a 6-figure salary. So then they have these ideas about, well, fuck women. I'm lonely, and all of this is happening because women are doing their own thing. Well, actually, you're not listening to women. We just have financial independence now. Get with the program and you won't feel so lonely.
And those sort of traditional tropes that you talked about from maybe a generation or two ago, so men being the protector and that being physically manifested, right? So like being aggressive, like looking after a woman's honor when you're in a bar, being overly protected, all that kind of stuff. Do you think that the expectation now is that men still tie it or buy into those traditional tropes, but then there's like a plus one, which involves emotional intelligence and being able to listen and making women feel seen and heard? Or do you think it's completely moved on? I guess the meaning behind my question is, do you think sometimes men there's too much expected of guys, or has it just changed?
I don't think there's been enough expected of men, quite frankly. And I mean, it sounds like what you're saying is that there's been this whole shift and that relationship structures and family dynamics have moved on and they have changed. And are you sort of saying that actually that's a lot for men to suddenly have to do, whereas women are okay with just sort of existing in the way that we've always experienced relationships, but now men suddenly have to unlearn everything?
Yeah, so my view is that there has been this sort of change for a lot of women in terms of what they're looking for from men. But I think for guys, sometimes it can be confusing because when I'm on dating apps, like I still recognize certain signals, which may or may not be right, where women ask for things like princess treatment or a man that's going to, like I say, protect them and have quite traditional old school values. And then that can differ quite a lot from, I don't know, when I speak to a lot of my female friends and they'll be like, I just want a man that understands me and makes me feel heard and seen. And I guess there's never a one size fits all approach, but speaking from my own experience, I find it quite hard sometimes to like navigate and understand what women want. And I guess that's because not every woman wants the same thing.
Exactly that. And that is about communication when you're on those dates and when you're meeting those women. And it's also about you thinking about, what is it that I actually want from a woman? Yeah. What is it that I actually want from a relationship? And reflecting on any of those things that might be very gendered. Now, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that traditional model. And in fact, for many people, that's beautiful. I'd have loved to have stayed in a relationship with the father of my son. Life would have been much easier if I had somebody to do this with. And I had, I've got nothing against, mum, dad, or mum, dad. I've got nothing against a traditional 2.4 children family. What I think the problem is that what that used to include was woman being chained to the kitchen sink, man having complete freedom, and that has to change. And I look at some women who are very traditional and are absolutely committed to, I want to be cook, cleaner, mother, and I want a husband who's protector, provider. Now, if you can find that with a man who is also going to give a shit about your period pains and be willing to go out and get tampons, who is going to make sure that you can sleep in the morning while he picks up the children and takes them down to the shops to get you some breakfast, who isn't going to be pissed off because you're now caring for your mother who's suddenly become ill, who's going to actually then step up in the home and nurture the children, bathe them every night because you're now at the hospital with your sick mum. In a lot of those traditional relationships, what happens is you're at the hospital with your sick mum and the husband is going, well, I don't know what the fuck to do. The house is falling apart. You need to do both. You need to juggle it all. You need to continue because I don't have the skills. I don't know how to run this house. So actually, even those women who felt like this is what I want, I want the traditional structure, when they're in it, they realize that actually you need a man who can do both. You need that man who's going to show up with emotional intelligence, because he what protection do you want? As I say, how often are people smashing your door down? More often than needing physical protection, I need emotional protection. I need someone who goes, that was a shitty day at work. Do you want to chat about that? Like, and doesn't just say, well, it sounds like you're moaning a lot, or why are you always the problem? You know, you need it all.
And that's difficult. I mean,
it's difficult for men. It's difficult for all of us. You know, we all sit here on these fucking podcasts chatting shit continuously about how can I show up? I don't fucking know until I've actually sat and I've met the man and we can work it out together and we can figure out what the hell both of us can bring to each other. But it's not going to work if men aren't actually exploring themselves. Like, okay, how can I show up if I'm not just a protector and a provider?
I mean, my personal experience with this is like I struggled the other way around. So, like, obviously, I went on a dating show which came out last summer, and my whole storyline was around like modern masculinity, and it's a lot of the stuff that I explore now is talking about that. But when we talk about those traditional tropes, I worry that as a man, I'm not able to do those things because I'm not.
What was the thing with you? Is that you wanted her to pay half?
Yeah, so our whole storyline was around like equal contribution in relationships, because that's the way that I've been raised, right? And it doesn't necessarily mean financially, because if I earn 100 grand, my partner earns 30 grand, I don't expect a 50-50, but I do expect equal contribution across the board. So it might be that, to your point, like you're contributing more in the house and therefore I have to contribute more financially. It depends on how you kind of balance it. But my worry is that, like, physically, I'm like, I wouldn't be able to, like, if I, heard a burglar in the night, I'd probably go downstairs like first, but I'd be worried that I wouldn't be able to protect my partner in that traditional way. Even the idea of a provider, like I earn a pretty good salary in London, I would no way in hell be able to like support myself and my partner and potentially children on one salary. So I've really wrestled with a lot of this stuff myself, because like every guy kind of wants to be a unicorn, right? And be everything for everyone. But you're right. It's about communication with your partner, I think, and understanding like what's important to you, and does that actually align with what's important to me? And I've got a fucking trail of like bad relationships in my past because I haven't been able to deliver that sort of level of communication, or try to be something that I'm not.
Well, it's very difficult, isn't it? And also, what does it mean to you to be a provider? Thinking about that, because providing doesn't, as you say, it doesn't have to be financial. What other things can you do to make someone feel safe and looked after? And actually, as we've said, the safety isn't actually about people raiding your house.
Yeah.
It might be about emotional safety.
Yeah.
It's knowing that I can come home to my partner and he's going to create a safe space for me.
Yeah.
That, to me, is a protector. If you are protecting my emotions, you don't have to be punching people out at pubs who've pinched my bum or whatever. Although, actually, if that did happen, I would quite like a man who's going to knock a fucker out.
Yeah.
But how often does that happen, So to be looking for a man for that specific purpose is quite ridiculous, because you're only going to need him once every 20 years if you're very unlucky.
Yeah.
Actually, he has to be able to protect and provide in other ways. And all of those ways, really, for a healthy relationship are emotional and caring and looking after you.
Yeah. And I think that idea of a provider, like, the way that I've tried to rationalize that myself has been like, selfishly, in a way, learn to provide for yourself. And what I mean by that is like do the work, like interrogate your own behavior, understand where that comes from. If you're feeling threatened by some behavior that your partner's exhibiting, like understand where that feeling comes from, you know, because that's the only way that you're going to be able to make your partner feel safe emotionally, I think, is like understanding yourself.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good point. It's like, you know, I think for all of us, men and women, it's quite an immediate reaction sometimes to blame another person when we're feeling shit or when something, you know, it's often good to sit with that thing of is it this other person? Is this other person responsible for what's just happened here? Have they made me feel these feelings, or are these feelings in me somewhere and they've just sort of brought that up? And is this my thing that I need to reflect on? I think often if men really sat with things and thought, is it this woman's fault, or actually, do I need to look a little bit deeper at why I think it's this woman's fault or why I'm blaming women in general? I think men don't do enough self-reflection.
I agree with that. So I want to talk about, just going back to the topic of the episode, blame, right? And when you and I spoke last week, you spoke about your book and you spoke about the three main sort of talking points when you look at the community that you've fostered online. And from memory, the biggest talking point was around misogyny in dating, and I just wanted to explore that a little bit. What does that even like mean for the guys out there that might not understand that concept?
So yeah, I'm starting to structure my new book, and I asked my audience about common dating themes that are replaying over and over again for them in 2025. And I put it through ChatGPT because I had thousands of answers, and the top issue that my audience, who are 95% women, was gender role expectations and misogyny, and how that is showing up in dating. And I mean, it's so multi-layered how misogyny can show up in dating right from the start. Like if you look at dating app profiles from men, as you just said, a lot of them will be like traditional guy, and that's fine. You can be a traditional guy, but if it's like no lip fillers, no natural only, you know, half these men who are looking for natural women, if we actually turned up completely natural, you'd be fucking horrified. Like, you do not want me without mascara. But so you can see those little signs there that there is these expectations from men who are on dating apps about, I want a woman to be a wife. I don't want her to look a certain way. You'll often see it about no OnlyFans. If you're a woman who's just got loads of pictures of you traveling all over your Insta, you're a no-no. And it's like, what they're trying to allude to is, I think you're a prostitute, basically. But actually what they're threatened by is a woman having independence, financial independence, being able to show that she's living a life that she doesn't need you for.
Yeah, right.
How can you compete with a woman who's off to Mexico and Thailand and whatever? So that is misogyny, even though some people might interpret that as like, well, he doesn't want a woman who's flying all around the place. Why? Like,
that would be my dream partner.
Absolutely. But a misogynistic man doesn't want a woman who can fly free. So we see it on dating apps. We see it even the way that they approach us on dating apps. There's misogyny laden in so many of the initial opening questions they ask us. Very obviously would be if they approach you straight away with very sexualized conversations, and that happens all the time. Really nasty stuff. And then if women react, it's, you know, then again more misogyny, where they'll say something like, with those pictures, men are only going to be wanting to bang you on here, you know. So we're already under a very misogynistic lens when we're on dating apps. We are being viewed through the male gaze, and that can often, the way they feel about women can often come out in their bios. It can come out in the messages that they have for us. And then again, things like issues again around like should you pay on the first date and things like that. For me, I think a man should pay on the first date. And again, you know, it's not about because this is the traditional way to do it. For me, I'll probably have to get an Uber home because it's not safe for me to travel on public transport. It's probably cost me, I've got, you know, Hourglass mascara, NARS blusher. My face cost me 50 quid just to put on. I've had to go and get my nails done. And again, feminists listen to this will be like, you don't have to get your nails done. You don't have to have a face full of makeup. Yeah, well, unfortunately, I do. And that is patriarchal society and misogyny, and how it has infected me for my whole life to tell me that I have to look a certain way to attract a man. And we can argue that as much as you want from a feminist lens, but it's facts. You know, I am single and I have to present myself in the most attractive way. It's like a bird with a mating dance, you know. But then even on dates, you have those things like double standards around first night sex. Again, misogyny is so deeply entrenched in that, because you and I could go on a date, have the best time, the best chemistry, we fuck, and the next morning you've had post-nut clarity. I'm dying to be validated by your message, and I don't hear from you because you've now moved on to the next, because you've decided, well, I can't have that woman as the mother of my children, because she's now fallen into whore version in the Madonna versus whore.
I hate this because I see this same behaviour in myself, right? And if I go on a first date with someone and I really like them and I can see it having potential, I have to make a conscious effort not to have sex with that person and make sure I wait. And that's because of my own. I don't know where that comes from.
Well, you do know where it comes from, because it's what you have been socially conditioned into believing with every drip of information that you've had since you were a child, that has taught you that good women don't fuck around and that good women don't have pleasure from sex, and that the mother of your children has a vagina to give birth to those children. That is what it is for. And that's why we've had the orgasm gap for women. That's why sex has traditionally been a thing for us, because men have always been taught that for women, sex is a reproductive act and it is something that men do to us, rather than a mutually respectful, fun act that we both want to do together. So women's right to sexuality has kind of been removed. And then when women do have sexual needs and desires, that then starts to trigger off the misogyny in you that says, oh, whore, not good enough to be. And again, I have to say, this is not all men. And there are millions of relationships that have started with first night sex and they've just never left each other's sides, because some men are developed enough to know that actually the horniness that I feel in my penis is shared in her vagina, and that's okay. It's all right. It doesn't make her a whore or a heathen. She's allowed to have sexual feelings. But so misogyny ties into absolutely everything. So for a lot of men, and I've heard this so many times, a man will go on a couple of dates with someone, really like her, think, wow, she's got great potential, and then they will send her picture in a group chat and they'll contact a few guys they know, like any info on her, anyone else dated her, and if the CRB check comes back like, oh, she dated Ben when she was in year 11, that's like, whoa, what? She fucked Ben when she was in year 11. No, we can't touch her now. Or even, you know, I know she dated my cousin, and she doesn't even have to have had sex. But knowing, but they will assume, or they will say that they've had sex with her even if they hadn't. But that man will then just be like, right, well, I can't. Even though this woman made me laugh, I felt amazing with her. I really saw potential in her, because I can see how other men in my group and my circle are going to judge me for giving time to that woman, because they know that she's had a sexual history with someone else. Cancel out. Because how you men think about me is more important than my quality of relationship with this woman.
And this is like old school pack mentality. Cavemen times, where you are so fearful of being rejected by the group, right? And we've just moved on from that, or you'd hope we've moved on from that, but clearly maybe we haven't. Before we move on to audience questions, we've spoken a lot about misogyny and how that shows up in dating. I just wondered, people that have had long-term relationships that are starting to recognise or have recognised this behaviour in a partner for a while, like what sort of questions, points of view do you get from your audience when it comes to that? And like, is it something which potentially women haven't recognised at the time and it slowly starts seeping into relationships? Does it show up differently in an established relationship to dating apps, for example?
Well, I mean, I think something that's happening a lot at the moment is that I'm getting messages from women who've been in relationships for a really long time, marriages, have children, 10, 15 years together, and their husbands are slowly, and now rapidly actually, and a lot of this is since lockdown, becoming more and more right-wing.
Yeah.
And right-wing and kind of misogyny. I mean, you know, I don't want to go into a whole big political explainer. I'm not saying that all right-wing people are bad, but if we're talking about the far right, fascism, that side of things, you know, that's where misogyny sits and is celebrated in the same place as racism and transphobia and homophobia and anti-immigrant feelings. And all of those things are really rising at the moment and are being encouraged to rise by right-wing podcasts, Jordan Peterson, Joe Rogan, all of those things, GB News, Nigel Farage. You have all these voices now that are telling men and telling the world that this is the cause of your problems. What the fuck? Like, your life is fucked because those men on boats, those people pretending to be women, and those women there who are saying that there's something wrong with you. You know, they are being taught that everyone else is to blame except them. When in reality, the blame lies squarely with capitalism, billionaires, corrupt governments. But everybody is being taught to blame someone else. And what's happening in relationships now is women who married really nice people. I mean, I often think about Russell Brand's wife.
Yeah.
Russell Brand's wife married this extremely left-wing activist, very progressive, non-religious comedian. And now she is in a relationship, I mean, put the sexual assault allegations to one side, with a huge religious fundamentalist, Christian, right-wing grifter. And on a much smaller scale, this is happening to lots of women. They're having relationships with men who they once totally agreed with, and then those men over time are expressing more and more harmful, vitriolic views about marginalized groups, including women. I know of a lot of women who are having to leave relationships because they're frightened of not just the change in their husband and how that impacts on how he treats them, but also the way that it is impacting on their children. I spoke to a woman whose husband was just getting progressively more and more right wing, just stopped helping in the home, whereas before he was really doing equal stuff, started saying things like, this is a woman's role. At one point, he stopped collecting the kids from school because he's heard something on a podcast and he said, I'm not doing this anymore. Like, I'm the only dad at the gates. This is embarrassing for me. I'm not collecting the kids from school anymore. That is your job. No consideration for the fact that she actually has a job, and that's why he was doing the school job. I mean, I think he had a job as well. But I think the final straw for her was that I think something happened in the house. The young daughter was like dancing around in her knickers and a vest or something, and the teen brother was like, "Oh, you whore, like stop, you know, doing that." And the mum was just like, "Shit, like my son is now picking up on all of this stuff."
Yeah.
And eventually she left the relationship. But this is happening more and more. So it's happening where you're in a relationship with someone, their views completely change, but also to the question that you asked, you can pick it up. You can pick it up from the dating apps. You can pick it up, the misogyny. You can pick it up in the very early stages. There are often signs, but there aren't always. People can change.
Where is this? It blows my mind. It's because where is this desire to pick up or buy into those ideologies coming from? Is it through fear? Like, is it men that are suddenly like, right, I'm earning less money than before, I need to reevaluate what my role in a relationship is? Like, why is it happening?
Well, I think fear is the answer, and then that fear is being stoked by these red pill manosphere communities and, you know, politicians like Nigel Farage.
Yeah.
Because I don't think we should dismiss how these men are feeling and how these men come to these places, because actually they are frightened. They are noticing a drop in their wages. They are feeling lonely. They're struggling with friendships. They're struggling with women. And that is, of course, a place that we have to have compassion and empathy for. But from that place of like sadness and fear, what is happening is they're being captured by grifters who are able to exploit those vulnerabilities. And he says, yeah, we get how you're feeling. We know how you're feeling. And you would feel differently if you just banged a couple of whores, you know? You would feel differently if you just went to the gym, jacked up, and then knew that you could smash any man in his face that you saw walking down the street. And also, you would feel differently if these immigrants weren't coming here, raping your women, taking your women. You would feel differently if all of these gay people weren't out here trying to make men soft and gay. And it resonates because nobody else is giving them the answers. Because if they come to my side of the internet, the left wing, or maybe even yours, we're saying, well, what about you? What can you do differently?
Yeah.
What therapy can you get? Which women can you listen to? Which immigrants can you listen to? Who can you hear to get these answers that are going to make you feel better? And actually, that's really uncomfortable work that you have to do to get those answers. And it takes a lot. And it's much easier just to go, well, Andrew Tate says that all I need to do is go to the gym. And then that's cool.
Yeah, exactly.
All Nigel Farage says is that I need to vote for him and we're all sorted.
Yeah.
So they offer much easier, more tangible feeling solutions than the complex psychological, emotional, evolving that we're asking them to do on the other side.
And it's about accountability for your own behavior, right? And it's far easier to say, I just need to do this thing, which I'm very comfortable with as a man, whether it's like lifting weights, buying a fucking sports car, than actually doing the work and looking inward. And that's scary for a lot of guys and a lot of women as well. But I just, thank you for that. Next part of the episode, audience questions. You'll be familiar with this. Had a few last night when I said you were coming on. This is a broad one. We covered a little bit of it already, but I'd love to get your perspective on it. So why do men say feminism has ruined relationships?
Oh, because they're idiots. Feminism quite clearly hasn't ruined relationships, but the way that they see it is that feminists are the people who fought for things like the 1975 change to make sure that women could rent by themselves. Feminists are the ones who fought for us to have the right to vote in 1928, not even 100 years ago.
Yeah.
A few women got the right before that, but only if they were over 30 and owned property or whatever. It wasn't until 1928 that all women were allowed to vote. So it's feminists who have been arguing and campaigning and fighting for all of these changes, the Equality Act, all of these things have happened, I guess, over the last 100 years. And men are seeing and feeling those changes, as we discussed earlier in the episode. You can't just say, I've got a job, you need to marry me because otherwise you're going to be homeless. You have to say, I've got a job and I'm going to make you laugh and I'm going to be kind to you and I'm going to be here for you emotionally. And that's very difficult for men. So instead of them catching up, they have literally just gone, well, these fucking feminists ruined it for us all. I'm lost. I don't know what's going on anymore. And that's literally it. Things have changed. Women have been emancipated, not fully and not in everywhere in the world. And that's why I think we have to be really conscious of the fact that if women in Afghanistan are not allowed to speak and sing in public in the year of 2025, this is not set in stone. Yeah, you can't just go, oh, it's a different culture. No. Where are all the men in that country standing up to defend the rights of women? They're not there.
Yeah.
We are all very aware of how easily this could all come crashing down. And so feminists are still fighting and trying to say, like, get on board with us. But red pill manosphere is saying actually feminists are the cause of all of your problems, and men are just stuck in this lost place where actually if they just went, okay, women have got their own shit now, what can we do?
Yeah,
it would all be all right. It's too simple.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Why do men expect sex on the first date and then judge you for having sex with them?
I don't know if they expect it. A lot of men, I think, and you'll probably be able to explain this more than me. I I think for a lot of men, it's a challenge. And if they're able to get sex with a woman on a first date, then that is a huge validation of your masculinity.
Yeah.
It's a huge ego stroke because women aren't supposed to want to fuck you on the first date. So if she's done that, then oh my God, I'm just the best guy ever. So I think that there is a lot of that. And also I think that there is a lot of testing that goes on. I think some men, not all men, will do that as a test. They will see if she'll pass that test. And if she has sex, then she hasn't passed the test because she can't be wifey now because she must do that with everyone. So I think there's that as well. And this is why I always say to women, don't have sex on the first date. Not because, you know, we're worried that he might think we're a slag. I don't give a shit whether you think I'm a slag, but I don't want to fail your test. Not because I want to be in a relationship with you. I don't want to fail your test and you've got sex out of that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I get that.
Don't fuck men on a first date. I think it's a terrible idea. Again, you can. There will be people listening who fuck their husband on a first date and it was the best thing ever.
Yeah.
I think it's a bad idea in dating.
And I think you hit the nail on the head earlier, and it's something which I need to reflect on around that conditioning point. Because if I have sex with a woman on the first date because it feels like it was the thrill of the chase, and it's almost like a point of coercion, as much as it pains me to say that, if I feel like I've won that person, if I'm like, maybe she didn't go into the date thinking I'm going to have sex with this dude in the first date, but I charmed her so much that she was like, I'm going to shag him. That feels good. If it's a case of a woman, I'm going to go into this because I just want something casual and I want to get pleasure for myself, that doesn't feel as good. And like, this is a realization that I haven't really had before, if I'm honest with you. So there's a point around power, I think, and that sort of dynamic, which is kind of ugly, but you got to reflect on this stuff. So
yeah, and I think it is really important to reflect on that. And that is the case because women often say, like, guys, why are you finessing and manipulating women into bed when there are loads of willing women? Go into field. There's tons of women on there who absolutely just want to have sex, no strings attached. They want the same as you. But exactly as you said, that's too easy. That's not what they want. That it's not just the sexual pleasure. They would just have a wank if it was. It's actually far more than that. It is about the power. It is about that dynamic. It's about reinforcing your masculinity through a woman's body. Yeah.
I mean, even things like, you talk a lot about sex work, right? And how that's incredibly stigmatized. But, you know, actually, as long as it's done in a safe environment, like an environment where a man can get that sort of physical thirst quenched in a way which he knows not going to hurt someone emotionally.
Yeah. But it's too easy, isn't it? Like,
well, this is the thing. You don't get the thrill of the chase. There's not the power. The power sits with the person selling something.
Yeah, absolutely.
Final part of the episode is some advice. We always try and give advice to the women and the men listening to try and counteract a lot of the topics we've spoken about. So some of these questions will be quite open-ended and we're not going to crack them today because they're massive. But the first one is, what's your advice for women who keep running into that dynamic of being blamed, judged, shamed?
Well, just realise that none of this is your fault. Understand where it comes from. The biggest penny that dropped for me when I was probably in my late 20s was the understanding of how much my gender was contributing to all of the ways in which I was being treated. So it took me a long time to figure out, or maybe it's not because I was bad in bed or I'm a slag. Maybe it's because the patriarchy has taught this man, exactly as the discussion that we've just had. So I think for women, you take it off yourself. Like, it is not a personal thing. This mistreatment that you're receiving or misogyny that you're receiving, being treated with double standards, all of that sort of stuff, it is not personal. It is happening because of your gender, and that is really shit. And I would also urge women to really be on the lookout and really understand. What helps me actually is to listen to red pill communities. I engage, well, I don't engage with, but I make sure that I'm not in an echo chamber. I make sure that I'm hearing the things that I know that they're hearing, because then when I hear a very red pill talking point coming up, then that is a red flag to me. That is an alarm bell to me that this man has been in these kind of spaces. You know, even something like if he's like, well, females are always doing that. Why are you calling women females? Why, you know, there is a word for that, and it is women.
Yeah.
So even little small things like that would give you an indication that he is in those kind of misogyny spaces.
Are there any other sort of specific talking points that you might recognise amongst that stuff?
The 80-20 principle that they talk about all the time, female hypergamy, which has been debunked so many times, but there is this idea that 80% of women are only willing to date the top 20% of men, and they judge that top 20 as being what they would call like alpha male, high value men, according to them. And that again is 666 principle, 6-figure salary, 6-pack, 6-inch dick, I think it is, or 6 foot tall.
I feel very threatened right now because I don't think I'm any of those.
Yeah. So. God, what was we just talking about?
We were talking about the topics that you might, or the things that men might say.
So 80-20 principle, the whole hypergamy thing, which is this belief that women only want to date certain types of guys, and all of the rest of the men are basically dealt a hand that doesn't, means they'll never really get great women. They'll only get the spares and the leftovers from the very high value men, and that actually feeds very much into like incel culture and incel beliefs, and really it is not true. Like if they hung around with any women, I know so many women who are like recovering from mistreatment from like 5'5" men with more hair on their backs than on their heads, you know, who work in Aldi. Like there is, and these are like really great women. There is no truth to this idea that women are only wanting a certain type of man, and it's men that convince men of this. The other talking points are things like body counts, a guy being interested in the numbers of men that you have slept with, so that he can make a determination of what kind of woman you are based on how many men have tainted you. There's loads of sort of talking points within these, particularly stuff around feminism being bad.
And then my final question is sort of flipping that around a little bit and sort of looking specifically at men, and then if you are a man that maybe is listening to this episode or sees some of the behaviors that we've spoken about in themselves, like how do you alleviate that? Like how do you start educating yourself? How do you get rid of that conditioning that we've talked about? Because it's hard, right?
Yeah, and I think a good place to start is recognize what feels hard and just sit with it. Sit with it. If you hear me sitting here saying men do this, men do that, but before you react, sit with it. Why does that feel uncomfortable? Does it feel uncomfortable because I have named something within you? Or does it feel uncomfortable because it doesn't feel familiar to you? But then if it doesn't feel familiar to you, why are you instantly reacting with anger instead of actually listening to me as a woman who is sharing my experiences and who has access to hundreds of thousands of other women? Listen to us and hear us, and don't take that personally. And sometimes it will feel personal. That's okay. Nobody's expecting you to show up in this world as a perfect person. None of us are perfect. If something feels uncomfortable, it's actually much richer, like you just did, where you just said, oh shit, that's just struck a little chord with me about potential challenging, you know, the coercion kind of thing. That's really deeply uncomfortable for you to think about. Those times when you've perhaps had, you know, that challenge kind of mentality in your head. You'll never change that if you're not willing to go, shit, yeah, okay. Okay. Where does that come from? What can I do about that? How have I been taught to feel about women and sex that has led me to that place? It's about self-reflection and sitting with the discomfort and listening to women.
And my final question, thank you, you've been amazing. Role models. I mean, we spoke about it last week, but we spoke about it on the episode just now. I'm not a male role model, which I think men traditionally raised men are ever going to look up to. And I think it's a big problem in society as a whole that there aren't men that fit that traditional, maybe alpha mold that speak about this stuff. They're able to reflect. Is there anyone that you would suggest looking at for this kind of stuff?
Yeah, there's some really great men out there, like Ben Hurst. He's, I think, the real Ben Hurst on Instagram. Jordan Stevens is doing some lovely work at the moment. The Ex-Patriarch on Instagram is really good. And Will Hitchens. But I guess all of these guys are in the same bracket as you. They would very much be considered probably socialist, media, middle class types.
Yeah.
And the type of men that we need to reach, I guess, are men who would probably be more inspired by someone who was like Andrew Tate or you know, looked and sounded like him, as long as he was saying, you know, better things. We need like a Mick Lynch type, or just someone who doesn't seem unattainable to your average man or to working class men. You need someone who doesn't make them feel inferior in any way. What I think is sad is that role models for men can't be women, because actually what we need you to be modeling at the moment is learning how to develop that emotional intelligence and that empathy and all of those things that we need from you in friendships and relationships. Self-reflection, self-awareness, ability to be vulnerable, ability to be fragile, ability to not internalize your pain and then eventually that comes out as aggression or violence. All of those things, we can model that for you, because actually women are much better at those things. The problem is to get men to actually want to model from us. It feels like every time the question is asked about role models, we have to find these sort of male role models for men. But why can't I be your role model? And I mean, I'm not going to be. That's the thing. It's like I actually, the sad thing is that I don't actually think any of this stuff is ever going to change. I'm going to die and it's going to be the same, and my granddaughters are going to be fighting for the same stuff, and they're going to die and their granddaughters are going to be fighting for the same stuff. I don't think we're actually ever going to make any real significant changes until men are able to admit. Have you ever heard of, I sent you a link actually, Previn Karyan, his name is. He's a really great psychologist and philosopher. And he talks about how misogyny is a sickness. It is a mental health disorder, and that the psychology of men is inherently somewhat problematic and does involve a lot of aggression and violence, and does involve a sense of deep inferiority to women, because women have capabilities that men will never have. Childbirth, child reared, carrying children, and having those emotional resources and resilience to be able to deal with it. So he says that men are so deeply entrenched with their feelings of inferiority that unless they get through that and actually understand that he himself is a man, and he's like, I have a sickness within me, and that is the misogyny and the male psyche. And because I am conscious of it, I can do things about that. I can suppress the violence. I can encourage emotional vulnerability in myself. But he says, until, you know, all men in society are able to acknowledge that without that making them feel like they are inferior or less than or a complete write-off, then nothing is going to change. And Freud was saying the same stuff. Like, this is not about writing laws or trying to uncondition society or give people new role models. This is about an internal sickness within men, of a feeling of inferiority. And until that is addressed, they will continue to try to keep holding women down and blaming us for everything.
So I grew up in a single parent family, right? Raised by my mum. My dad was very much that. He'd be an Andrew Tate follower now, you know, if he knew how to use YouTube. But part of me reflects on this, and it's a great way to close the episode by saying my mum is a role model to me, and it's probably a big part of the reason why I think the way that I do. And I've always beaten myself up about that, but and felt like there was something missing from my childhood. But, you know, as I age, like, part of me is quite grateful for it in a weird way. So is there anything you want to add before we wrap up?
No, your mum did a great job.
Thank you. I'll make sure that I'll tell her that, because
Yeah,
she'll be really happy about it. Guys, that's it for today. Big thanks to Lala for cutting through the noise, giving us language for what so many people are seeing and feeling. If you're someone who's caught yourself blaming women for your loneliness, frustration, or failed relationships, this is an invitation to look inward, not outward. There's power in that. And for women who are tired of carrying the emotional weight, you're not crazy, you're not alone. This is a very common thing. I think this is about questioning systems, conditioning, not each other. Let's keep the conversation going. Please DM me with any questions about the episodes, or Lala. We're both pretty good and pretty reactive on social media. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming in.
Thank you.
You're welcome.